middle of the night, pitch black with your headlamp on. And man, that was stressful. All you'd be thinking was a big hairy arm's going to come out of the black and grab you.
Okay, this is Linda Eastburn, and I have Thomas Seawitt here with me
Thanks,
today.
Mom.
And we are interviewing him at his store. And he has a lot of Bigfoot information to tell us today. So, Tom, the last time we spoke, you gave us a lot of information on Sasquatch in that area. And from that interview, I believe you were offered a speaking engagement on a cruise. Tell me about that cruise, how that went.
Actually, I did the cruise last year out of Seattle called Alaska Bigfoot Cruise with Gather Up Events. And my wife and I went on board ship with Dr. Jeff Meldrum, David Paulides, and we went to Alaska and back. Of course, Jeff Meldrum got sick while we were southbound by Ketchikan. He had to be retrieved by the Coast Guard off the cruise ship. But it was a great event. There's almost 400 people signed on. They sold out all the cabins that they bought. And we performed on board the ship during a gale off northern Vancouver Island. It's kind of funny because I was standing on stage and I'm being a commercial fisherman. I have sea legs, but I was rocking and rolling pretty good while I was telling everyone about Sasquatch. And my wife came on the stage with our Kwakwaka'wakw tribal mask and fur regalia. And the people really enjoyed it. And then when we got to Ketchikan, we did a town hall meeting conference that was filled to capacity. And Jeff Meldrum and I and David Paulides, and then they flew Robert Alley up for that one. So it was a pretty good event. And they did it again this year. I was booked to fly up with my wife to Juneau, but here I am, it's Biggie behind me, our big Sasquatch mannequin. And I manage since the end of April, SasquatchLegend.com here in Forks, Washington, which is United States, North America's largest Sasquatch store. We got all kinds of merchandise, as you can see all around behind me, shirts and you name it, Sasquatch, we got it. And unfortunately, I was so busy and we had a big festival taking place here in same period as the Alaska Bigfoot Cruise, so I had to cancel for 2024. But you never know, I might be on next year's. We'll see what happens.
Well, it sounds like an adventure. It sounds like a really good trip. So what did you talk about on that in your talk on the cruise?
Basically, I educate them about the Canadian First Nations or Indian beliefs, perspectives, and understanding of Sasquatch. And then, of course, showing them what our tribe does during our big potlatch ceremonies, where a chief shows all of the crests, masks, songs, and dances within our ceremonial big houses. And, most people don't ever get to witness that. So seeing my wife come on stage with the mask and the fur regalia of a Sasquatch, which we call Chonafa, it's pretty amazing for most people. And that's what we share on when we go to conferences and different things. Or if people come on expeditions with me, we'll showcase the regalia and everything, as well as I teach them to hopefully have a close encounter of a hairy kind with Sasquatch. That's what I mainly teach people, is because I lived in the bush of coastal British Columbia all of my adult life. I was a grizzly bear hunting guide for 24 years. I was a Bushman that lived out there doing ecotourism, harvesting shake cedar blocks for shake and shingle roofs, so we worked in the bush, commercial fishermen. And then living in bush, one of the main staples is shellfish, clams during the months with an R. So from September through until end of April, the big low tides are at night and we'll go out clam digging. And a lot of times when I was out there clam digging by myself or with a small group of men, you would hear tree breaks, trees being pushed over. You'd hear the whoops and the whistles, and you knew it was Sasquatch was out there, and they weren't too happy with you digging shellfish on their beach per se. So we used to tell one of the guys, or I would do it, where you'd grab some of the shellfish called cockles, which is the favorite food of Sasquatch and humans, and you'd walk the 100 yards up to the tree line, middle of the night, pitch black with your headlamp on. And man, that was stressful when you walk up to those black bushes and throw those cockles into the forest for the Sasquatch, sort of an offering, just to, leave us alone. We want to clam dig. We don't need to hear you or have things thrown at us. And all you'd be thinking was a big hairy arm's going to come out of the black and grab you and pull you in the bush. But that never happened. But the next morning, one of the guys who was a skeptic, we tell him, go ahead, row ashore, go see if you can find those cockles we threw in last night. And they'd come back and they'd say there was no cockle shells, no cockles, but big footprints in the moss. Well, there you go. Told you that was a Sasquatch. So, living in the bush, being a coastal Indian, and that's what I'm bringing forward is we know about Sasquatch. We have an understanding of them. We have beliefs and perspectives. And all of us Indians in North America, we share one common understanding. You never, ever think of disrespecting a Sasquatch or think of killing one. And that's what we advocate. And that's what we're trying to educate the non-Indian is, you don't need to kill these beings that are out there. Sure, try to get them on a cover of National Geographic with an editorial and other pictures. But, there's no need to go out there in camo with guns and try to hunt them down because that's so disrespectful and it's not right. And that most Indian tribes would probably throw you out of their territory. They found out you're trying to kill a Sasquatch.
Hi, I'm Linda Eastburn of Linda Eastburn YouTube channel, and I have a new book out called Threshold to Encounters. It's about 40 years of research and experience with all of these wild cryptids that many of you I know have encountered yourself. You can find it on Amazon.com. Yeah. So tell me about some of this regalia, as you refer to it, on the cruise, some of the symbolism behind that and what's the purpose in some of that?
So when you go to a potlatch and you see a chief have one of his family members in regalia of a wood mask of a tunach, a Sasquatch, might have a basket on its back or not, but the song is telling you as the dancer performs, posturing, like rubbing its eyes like it's just woke up and yawning. And then as it's walking, it might be representing throwing bad children into the basket that she's going to take into the forest and eat, because that's what our boogeyman is to our kids. You behave yourself because Chunach, the Sasquatch, is always watching. And if you misbehave, Sasquatch is going to come at night and with big hairy arm, reach into that bedroom window or a tent and rip you out, rub spruce sap from a tree on your eyes so you can't open your eyes and you're blind. And she's going to put you in her basket on her back or in a sack, carry you into the forest, boil you up and eat you. So behave yourself. So that's what we teach our children as Kwakwaka'wakw tribe members. And, it keeps them behaving themselves, especially when you go camping or out clam digging or out in the bush. Your children behave themselves when they know that Chunach, Sasquatch, is always watching them and they have to behave. So
some of your artwork demonstrates this. I remember seeing some pieces of artwork that you have done. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. I'll just go see if I can find my T-shirt rack here. Yeah, so a lot of my art, like I did this one here, this is Patty 352 frame done in native style. The one I'm wearing right now is Sasquatch Island Whoop Whoop. It's the noise Sasquatches make. This one here is Sasquatch and Salmon. It was, I did it because a friend of mine looked out his tent when he heard someone walking up the gravel bar when he was sports fishing on Vancouver Island years ago. And when he put the flashlight on, it wasn't a person. It was a big Sasquatch carrying a big king salmon. So I did that design for him and he really liked it. And now we make it into a T-shirt.
Yeah, I've seen some of that in the various groups on Facebook that you've posted. Yeah, that's very interesting. So I know the last time we spoke also, we kind of ended on kind of a cliffhanger sort of line that you said that you really felt like if a Sasquatch were ever found and we got some serious information about them, that you think that they would be another indigenous tribe. Tell me about that a little bit further.
Well, I haven't seen Sasquatch half a dozen times, within 30 feet. One of the things I did when I looked at them, I locked them, was I wanted to get the things that I hear. They have big canines like a gorilla. Well, the Vancouver Island and the Omaha Indian Reserve Sasquatches that I've seen up close have big teeth just like us. They remind me of chiclet gum. They're so big. And I never saw any pronounced canines like a gorilla. And so I got that out. The other thing I looked at was for the philtrum area. The distance from the upper lip to the bottom of the nose is very pronounced, like almost 3 or 4 fingers deep. And right there, I said, okay, they have a bigger philtrum than us regular humans. Their nose just looks like a human. It's you don't see the sort of open nostrils like a chimpanzee that some people put into their art of Sasquatch. But one of the biggest things I noticed is they don't look like Biggie up here. So Biggie is what I call the Jesus Christ belief of what a Sasquatch looks like. Someone drew Jesus Christ looking like he came from London, England, with fair skin and Caucasian looks. Why would Jesus look like that? He comes from the Middle East. He'd look like someone from Israel area, the darker skin, different features than what we perceive as Jesus. So Sasquatch is someone took a chainsaw years ago and carved a log and made it look like a biker, hillbilly, bearded Sasquatch with a big pronounced mustache. The ones I've seen don't look like that. They're like any other Indian. If I tried to grow a beard 4 months later, you'd laugh at me because it's all patchy and a little bit of hair here and there. But I'll never get a 6 or an 8 inch or longer hair off my face because I'm a thoroughbred Indian. We have body hair. My wife, 17 years ago, asked if I shaved my legs because I have no hair on my legs and hardly any on my arms. And you can count my chest hairs on one hand. That's a thoroughbred Indian. So the Sasquatch's facial features are just like any other thoroughbred Indian. If they have hair, it's very sparse and it's not very pronounced like a biker beard or a hillbilly beard. So that's one of the things I noticed. The other one was the eyes. Always hearing this red glowing eyes, red glowing eyes. Well, I've seen them day and I've seen them at night. I did see them when I had a spotlight on 2 Sasquatches on the beach from my commercial fish boat in the early 1990s. I did see the orangish reflection coming from their eyes, but I never saw ever what people talk about, even daytime sightings where they see these glowing red eyes. To me, I didn't see that. And then the other one was the ears. The one I saw was just like me with very big pronounced earlobes. And that's another indicative sign of Western North America indigenous people, us Indians. We have big earlobes, a lot of us. And the other thing I noted with them is I used to always tell people, Dr. John Bindernagel, the famous Sasquatch guy who was a good buddy of mine on Vancouver Island, he taught me that when in doubt, throw it out. So one of the things I brought to him, I said, how come when you look at pictures of monkeys, chimpanzees, orangutans, mountain gorillas, bonobos, humans that have been out camping or hunting or in bush for over 10 days and they haven't bathed or showered, you get that really oily hair, that matted, flat hair, but well kept because it's groomed. And you always see monkeys and chimpanzees and orangutans, gorillas grooming each other or themselves. Humans are no different. We're constantly grooming ourselves, even when we're filthy dirty out in the bush. But we always have that oily hair. And then when you see these supposed Sasquatch pictures and videos where they have that synthetic, fluffy, spiky hair, when in doubt, throw it out. To me, I usually refer that one as being, a hoax because it doesn't have that oily look. And the Sasquatches I've seen, that's one of the things I noted. Like the one on Vancouver Island where I have my cabins where I used to do sea kayaking with killer whales and humpback whales. We now use it for Sasquatch investigations because there's so much activity there. The Sasquatch there that I used to call Scout, I now call him Elvis because he looks like Elvis Presley from the 70s, late 60s, got that real cream, oily hair look about him, well kept. And I remember when I put a university professor who contracted me for a Sasquatch investigation, and they were using night vision goggles for a helicopter worth over $20,000. And I said, here, take a look. There's a Sasquatch tree peeking at us right now in the forest. So he looked, and all of a sudden he goes, and he was British. He's like, oh my God. I'm looking at the bloody Sasquatch. And you're right. He does look like Elvis. His hair is very oily. So those are the things I use to weed out the reports or the pictures or videos that I find to be, hoaxes. There's someone's just fibbing us because it doesn't have the major indicators. And, I'm one of the strongest advocates that even in the store, I'm telling the owners, quit buying stuff for us to sell that have biker beards on Sasquatches. I'm educating everyone, and people are, starting to use their frontal lobes and reading my posts and hearing me on podcasts and videocasts. Research the sketches that people have done when they've seen a Sasquatch up close. And you'll find some of them have even gone to those artists that work for the police to reproduce what a person looks like. You'll notice that all of the sketches of Sasquatches from encounters, very limited to no facial hair, no canines. They'll grimace at you with no canines. They just got big teeth, just like us, because they're humans. And that's, to me, why I call them the humans of the night, or the perfect human. The reason why I call them the perfect human is because we live in a world where we're terrified right now of Biden and Putin and Rocket Man and Israeli Netanyahu, that they might push buttons and eradicate us with nuclear bombs. And this is because our ancestor took two rocks and clicked them together and made spark, and would learn how to rub sticks to make bow drills, to make fire. And fire has evolved with us so that we have nuclear bombs. So Sasquatches don't use fire. They have laws, very strict laws, as the Omaha and other Indian tribes have taught me. They don't have permanent structures like us. They don't have tool use to a large degree like us. And in turn, they don't have weapons. And we have no reports of Sasquatch clans mass fighting, warfare between each other. Sure, the odd skirmish where it's probably a mating battle or tribal turf fight, between two Sasquatches. That's the only reports we get. And that's why I call them the perfect human, because they have laws, very strict laws, and they adhere to them. No fire use, no permanent shelter, no clothing, no weapons, no tools. And in turn, they know that we have nothing good to give them. That's why they don't come sit with us at our campfires and grab a s'more and roast it. That's why they don't come to our houses and knock on the door and want to communicate with us. They're generally curious about us. At the same turn, some are getting habituated where they'll bang the side of a house or tap on the windows so that someone gets scared and talks to their neighbor in the Indian Reserve and finds out, what, you're not feeding them? We bring out our refuse, our old food, our food that we don't use, our potato peelings. We throw them in the bushes behind our house. And Sitonga, the Sasquatch, will come in the Omaha Indian tribe and eat the food that's given to them by the tribe members. So the majority of Sasquatches, though, they hate us, despise us, loathe us, fear us, and know in their oral history that we gave them smallpox, influenza, tuberculosis, death by bullets, removed their forest, their home, destroyed the salmon runs and steelheads, so the rivers nowadays aren't as abundant as they once were. In British Columbia, some areas are devoid of shellfish because of commercial digging and poaching. So there's a reason why Sasquatches don't come near us. And there's a reason why the government doesn't want them found to truly exist, because they already know, because we've heard so many reports about the government, coming to retrieve bodies or injured ones, and the podcasts that have been out there for decades talking about the government knowing about their existence. They've already done the DNA and realized that Tom Seawood's right. They are the third Indigenous tribe of the United States and the fourth Indigenous tribe of Canada. And between the North American Indians, the Inuit up north in Canada and Alaska, and up in Canada, what you guys call Cherokee, we call Métis. 5 years ago, they got their recognition. Well, the Indigenous tribes in North America cost the governments billions of dollars a year. Now, if they say that Sasquatches do exist. They are indigenous. They're same DNA as us. Well, now you're going to have all the animal activists and environmentalists stepping forward. And if you own a ranch, thousands of acres, and you want to go knock trees down on your property so that you can grow alfalfa to sell to the Arabians for obscene price per bale, well, you're going to have to do an environmental Sasquatch assessment of the negative ramifications that'll be subjected to the Sasquatch because of the removal of those hundreds of hectares of trees. You'll never be able to log your own property again. And logging as we know it, mining, strip mining, fracking, urban sprawl will cease to exist. And in turn, the identification and knowledge of the other tribe known as Sasquatch will affect our gross national product, I think they call it, or something. And, you know, when you have logging being shut down, mining and things like that, we just have to look back at what the marbled murrelet and the spotted owl did to the industries of logging and others out here in the Pacific Northwest. So you can only imagine what's going to happen when Sasquatch is identified.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, you talked about that before about, you know, how things would definitely change if they were ever recognized as actually a species, and especially if they're identified as human-like. It would definitely change some laws, and it would certainly change a lot of industry and what the regulations might be. So you got a customer there.
Oh yeah, I'm just checking someone out. That's what the beeping is.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
First, we're
I
making
appreciate.
history. The first video cast of someone talking who's working in a Sasquatch store.
Yeah, that's good. I appreciate you going ahead with the interview today, even though you're manning the store today. But
Yeah. Well, my worker said she's on her way here. So
okay, great.
unique experience for everyone.
It is. Yeah, it's kind of fun. So, you go out and do research, and I know you have probably some of the most extensive Sasquatch research in your area. So, what are some of the more interesting encounters or experiences that you've had out there in the field with them?
I guess probably the best one would be when we were building cabins for my Indian tribe up in off northeastern Vancouver Island. And I told the crew in end of September, I said, keep your eyes out peeled and you might want to go to the outhouse in pairs. I said, or bring the gun. I said, we got Sasquatch probing our camp. I said, you know, we noticed we're losing our apples from the food locker and our garlic's going missing. And they didn't believe me till I showed them the tracks and where they were standing, depending on the prevailing northwest wind or the southeast wind. They'd be downwind from us at our edge of our camp, observing us. They're curious. And of course, sneaking in when we weren't watching or sleeping and stealing our food. So finally, one night I was having a cigarette and I was standing outside the cabin and it was drizzling a bit. So I was sort of under the eaves and it was blowing northwest wind. All of a sudden, a stick come from my left out of the bush and landed on the grass just above the beach. And I'm thinking, that's odd. The wind's in my face. That branch shouldn't be coming against it. So I flicked my cigarette and I walked to the edge of the building and I jumped and spun and looked towards the bush and landed on my feet. And there was a juvenile, teenage looking 6 foot, little better than 6 foot, lanky, lean Sasquatch. And he jumped in surprise. I jumped in surprise. He turned and ran. I turned and ran. And I jumped in the cabin laughing. And my native crewman cousin, he's in there and you quit teasing the Sasquatches. And I said, I wasn't teasing it. I spooked it and he spooked me. And so we left it at that. And then a couple nights later, you know, we noticed some garlic going missing again. And I said, okay, I'm getting sick of our garlic being stolen. I need it for my prawns and my crab butter. And we're out in bush, so it's not like you can just run down the street to the store. So I, just before dark, I put my camo on, grabbed my gun, and I snuck out of the cabin window. And as I was crawling towards the entrance to the trail to our outhouses in the bush, we had deliberately piled up all the leaves in big piles and I did it strategically so that I could use them to hide when I snuck out. Well, the entrance to the forest where the outhouses were, I crawled in this probably about a 5 foot or higher pile of alder leaves, so like maple leaves, brown, dry. I crawled into it and buried myself. And I was just sitting there peeking out of the leaves with my hat all covered in head. And sure enough, just before dark, you could see this big, lanky Sasquatch walking through the bushes, looking at the back of the cabins in my camp. And when he got to the trail, which was the old skidder trail from when they logged it decades before, so it's like a big berm bank, it grabs the tree with its left hand and it steps down off the berm, looking at the back of my cabin, some 50 feet away, I guess. And that's when I jumped out of the leaves and scared him. And, I'm like, hey, he looked at me and he jumped, hey, and he screamed and roared. He pulled the tree, jumped on the bank, looked at me and made an aggressive sort of stance at me with his teeth showing and everything. And I just like jumped up and going at him too, making a noise and hey, go on, get out of here and quit stealing my bloody food. And he turned and he just ran through the timber and just breaking branches and everything as he's going. And you tell like he got spooked big time. And that was next day we saw his dad, and it was a bigger one. And he was in the bush on the hill while we were working. And we used the rifle scope that we had in the box. And we were looking at that big male Sasquatch leaning against a big cedar stump that was probably, I guess, maybe 8 foot diameter and about 5 feet high. And he was leaning against that stump looking at us. And when he realized that all four of us were watching him, that's when he grimaced. Like that, stood up, and we could see it wasn't the teenager. It was Daddy. He was big. His shoulders were as big as that mannequin we have, basically the same size, 8 foot. He stood up and you can see all the leaves falling off him that he'd put on his body. And I think what he was doing was imitating what I had done to his son hiding in the pile of leaves. He did the same. But when he stood up and realized that he got bingoed, he got seen, he just stood up, grimaced, turned, and you could just tell by his body language that he was mad and angry as he stomped up into the forest and disappeared. And I looked at my crew. I said, I think I peed up higher the fence post than he could. I think they're going to leave the island now. And you got to remember, this island's only 250 acres big. It's not that big. Sure enough, peace. No more stolen garlic or apples, and no more hearing them or smelling them. They had left. And to me, being a bushman, and people got to remember, I lived in bush for years, and there was months where I would go and disappear in the bush and not interact with humans. And so basically I was going Sasquatch, being feral. And hold on just 1 second here. And to me, I always say, put your feet in the footprints of a Sasquatch and be like a Sasquatch to understand them. And I think what happened between me and the teenager and the father Sasquatch was that Sasquatch knew me. I'd lived out there for over 20 years. He knew what I looked like, sound of my voice, what I smelled like. And he probably told his teenage son, if there's a human, you can sneak into close to where they are and take their food and get away with it, not get bingoed, not get caught. That's the human right there. He's got good bush skills. So you're going to be better have listened to your training from Daddy in order to get into his camp and get away with stuff. And I think that was a training program for that younger Sasquatch by his father to come into my camp, observe us, take our fruit and our vegetable. And we even had a fish go missing one time out of a cooler of ice. So to me, I turned the tables. I bingoed the Sasquatch. I spooked this juvenile one twice. And I even turned the tables on Daddy when he was trying to hide in leaves looking at my camp. And so to me, I think, it's the Sasquatch realized that maybe it's not too wise to be poking around with me and my workers, because if I can turn the table on them, and they're not used to that. That's why we can't find Sasquatches, because they've forgotten more about stealth and windage and breaking silhouette and quietly crawling and spider crawling than we will ever know as humans in the forest. But when, you want to find one, like I was telling a couple here this morning in the store, and they're possibly going to come on an expedition with me tomorrow, be smarter. Charter a Indian guide. Lewis and Clark did it to find the mouth of the Columbia River, walking across what would become the United States of America. If they hadn't hired Indians, they'd still be stumbling around out there, never finding the mouth of the Columbia. So if you're going to catch a big salmon or steelhead here on the Olympic Peninsula, you hire a fishing guide. A lot of the rivers out here are closed to everyone sports fishing unless you hire an Indian guide from the tribe, and they'll put you on fish. So if you're going to find a Sasquatch, don't you think you should go to your local Indian reserve or native that live around your area and talk to them, especially someone who's got bush skills like me, and say, hey, I want to have a close encounter of the hairy kind. Is there a chance you could teach me how to get close to a Sasquatch and maybe audio record and videotape it and get a picture? Yeah, I'll charge you $250 a day. Let's go. And that's how I feel that, if we're going to get conclusive proof of the existence of Sasquatch, you're going to have to work with us Indians one way or another, because most people haven't to date, and they still haven't found Sasquatch. But we Indians know where they are. We understand them. And, me with the modern day smoke signal, Facebook Messenger, I'm getting reports on a weekly basis. Indians throughout coastal British Columbia and throughout Sasquatch Island, North America, Canada, US, coming to me because I'm an Indian, and I'm all over social media and TV because I'm a Sasquatch investigator. They trust me, and they come to me and give me their reports of, we got activity here in our village. And, as a month ago, it was crazy. Everyone was reporting smokehouses having doors left open and some of their smoked fish going missing because Sasquatches were coming at night and taking the fish they were smoking.
As you talked about that, I was thinking, a research trip with you, or how you approach your research of a Sasquatch, or in going out and finding them. How is it different than, say, a lay person here in the US or whatever, when they go? How would you classify your approaches as in what way is it different?
Well, having lived in bush for decades, I'm using skills that most people don't know. Lick that finger and stick it up. What's the wind doing? Use that wind to your advantage. I watch people all the time when we go, investigating or even hunting. They'll jump out of the vehicle and they don't do that. They don't test the wind. They just look at the forest and go, oh, gee, that's uphill. That's too hard to walk. I'll go downhill and walk. Well, they're walking with the wind. All the animals are smelling them. They're never going to shoot that deer or whatever they're after. So Sasquatch investigating is no different. You are hunting, but you have no intention of squeezing a trigger on a Sasquatch. But you gotta be diligent about the wind. It's gonna spook the Sasquatch, so you got to use it to your advantage because he's using it to his advantage.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
yeah.
My investigations, like I say, it's being a bear hunting guide for decades. I learned so much, and I just basically use those same skills. And then having lived out in bush, it's like when I go investigating, like next weekend, I got a serious investigation on Saturday afternoon until Sunday morning, and I will wash my clothes with no soap that I'm going to be wearing. I won't use any deodorant or any soap when I bathe. I'll just use water. And you got to be diligent about all of that. And the smell, like just wearing deodorant or hairspray or something like that, you never get close to a Sasquatch.
Being a bear hunter for as long as you were, and understanding their habits, how would you classify a bear?
What do you want?
Bear habits,
what you want me to run through?
How would you classify bear habits as opposed to Sasquatch habits? How are they different?
Bear are noisy. Sasquatch is stealthy. And just a sec, I gotta check something here. Something's not working. Actually, you gotta wait till my podcast is over. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, something going on with my cash register. I'm not gonna monkey with it with the podcast. Sasquatch is they're constant they're constantly in movement over high abundant seasonal protein. So bears are the same way. Like right now in the Olympic Peninsula, they're at the salmon spawning streams. Sasquatches are too. But a lot of people say, well, I go to the salmon streams all the time. I never see Sasquatch. I never see their tracks. Until you've been a grizzly bear hunting guide where you got to get your celebrity, billionaire, multimillionaire client, the biggest grizzly bar in the area, boy. That's what he used to say to me. You know, you're not in the main river system. You're not in the shallows where the females and the younger bears are. You got to go find that little tributary off a stream that goes into the Devil's Club and stinging nettles and thick branches of alder and you name it, where you're crawling in a ditch almost, and the salmon are all over the place spawning in 2-3 inches of water. In that jungle, in that ditch area, you're set up waiting because you've seen the tracks. And around the corner comes this big 1,000-pound grizzly bear. Well, he's in there for a reason. He doesn't want to be in the main creek where the females are that are going to bite him and swat him because they're a threat to, he's a threat to their cubs. And the younger males are going to, mainly run away from him, but the odd one might stand his ground and give him a slap upside the muzzle because he's big and he's competing with everyone else. So that's why the big bear got big. He got wise. Get into those ditches, those areas that you can go in and hear other animals coming in to try to feed, but also other bears realize they ain't dumb. They look down and go, gee, it'd be good fishing up there, but look at those big tracks. That really, really big grizzly, he's established that that's his feeding area. And might get jumped by him and get eaten. So I best to stay in the main river with the females and the other bears. I'm not going to go up where that big one is. Well, when you go after those big grizzly bears in those dense jungles like that, away from the main herd of bears, that's where you find the Sasquatch tracks. And the Sasquatches are no different than that wise grizzly bear. They're wise and smart, easier fishing. Knowing the big grizzly bears urinated and scratched trees and rubbed on trees and leaving his tracks lets the other bears know this is private property. This is the big bear fishing ground. But the big bear knows he has to share it with the Sasquatches. Now, I've only seen the tracks of both of them in these dense areas, but I don't know. Maybe they do have a protocol between one another. Maybe the bear fishes by day and the Sasquatch we know are nocturnal. Maybe they fish by night. Salmon are spawning mainly at night anyway. And we know on the major rivers, like where I'm studying here on the whole river on the Olympic Peninsula, there's a place where we found 2 caves that Sasquatch dug into the glacier alluvial till. It's basically just boulders and sand hill, riverbank. And it's like a little canyon area. It's impossible to climb the face of it. And we're trying to, we've probed it in 3 different areas, but we finally realized in order to get up to the upper deck, about 150 to 200 feet elevation, where we suspect we're going to find huckleberry nests of Sasquatches, because that's what Derek Randalls and Shane Corson with their Olympic Project team are finding here on the other part of the Olympic Peninsula. And this place is vast, so we're not investigating in the same areas. But they find impenetrable areas above salmon producing streams where they find the nests. So we're trying to get in there on the whole river, but doing one of our probes, we found an area where it's flat, all alder trees at the edge of the river, like almost like a park setting. It's so open under these trees and it's full of grass and elk tracks. And then 80 feet up the bank, we find a cave with a round rock the size of a cantaloupe. So what it is the Sasquatches dug these caves It's probably big enough for a family of two Sasquatch with a juvenile or two to be shoulder to shoulder in. But all of the rocks are removed except for this one big round boulder. And what it's for is all of a sudden they look down, they hear the elk, and all of a sudden they see an elk 80 feet or 100 feet below them. Well, they just grab that rock and throw it, cave in its skull or hit its ribs so it knocks down. They go down, break its neck. They got food. We find rocks all the time in prime animal crossing areas, feeding areas. And we native people know that Sasquatches use rocks to dispatch the animals they harvest for food. So what I teach people is what we can do with a single shot rifle iron sight, 22, for example, a Sasquatch can do with a rock. So when I was in the Omaha Indian Reserve, I was enlightened that that part of North America sure has a lot of birds. And when I was in St. Charles outside of Missouri, or St. Louis, Missouri, in February through April this year, I was enlightened to how many birds there are in that area, especially when we went into the backwaters of the main Mississippi River, harvesting the invasive Asian carp and gillnet boats. That's what I was doing down there. And we found earth houses, basically branches piled up to retain warmth, dispel snow and wind. And I got videos of it on Facebook on Sasquatch Island, what we found. But we were just poking around looking for Asian carp to fish, and I seen those structures and went up and investigated them. But while I was there, I was amazed at how many birds there were. Wild turkeys we'd see on the banks and in the bush, and other birds. So what we can do with a 22 single shot iron sight rifle, a Sasquatch can do with a rock. So always look at the abundance of bird life. And that's why when you open your eyes and investigate a little harder, like I do, you will find wings and legs of birds. And out here in coastal Pacific Northwest, up in Vancouver Island area through the years, I would find Canadian geese and seagull feathers in accumulation, meaning two or more plucked birds in that area were consumed. Well, sure, some of it probably wolf or raccoon, eagle, but some of them that I found where you could see the foot impressions in the forest floor, I knew right then that those Sasquatches were probably using rocks to harvest those seagulls and those Canadian geese. And if you read Dr. John Bindernagel's book, the first one, Sasquatch, North America's Undiscovered Great Ape, that he wrote in the 90s, you'll see a real good sketch of a Sasquatch with in its hand 2 or 3 ducks, and in the other hand holding a stick. Someone heard splashing of water, walked around the corner on the beach, and there was a Sasquatch up to its knees in the water with a handful of dead ducks and a stick. So, putting those all together, there's, you got to look for evidence of Sasquatch by what they're consuming and what they leave and where the seasonal abundance is.
You probably heard of the Olympic Project and those huge nests that was discovered. What do you think of that? Do you think that could be Bigfoot? Or
Oh, absolutely. Without a doubt. Yeah, we find nests all over the place, up in Vancouver Island, off Vancouver Island, northern British Columbia, Alberta, Pacific Northwest. They call them nests. They're not in there laying eggs or having babies. They're just like a gorilla and an orangutan, just a nice, comfortable place to bed down. And huckleberry boughs here in the Pacific North seem to be one of their favorite things. Ferns in British Columbia, up in off north in my traditional tribal territories, you'd find these big 8-foot by 5-foot, almost look like, well, they look like a bed, all of ferns.
There's an area that we discovered when I was making the film Byways of Bigfoot along the Niangua River, and it was a huge blackberry bush area. And underneath this, it was huge and it was real close to the water, but underneath it was kind of hollowed out, kind of like a nest under there. Would that be something that would describe some of their shelter, maybe?
I've heard of those, but in my investigations, I know Sasquatch don't like blackberries. Like even when I was in my abandoned native village, living there for a decade and a half or longer, it was overrun with blackberries. And you'd see where the bears were going in after it, probing it. Some areas where they were having to cross through it. And then you knew it was bear and deer that were using that as an animal trail. They had no choice. There was a wall of blackberries. They had to go through it, but all the animals were using that one trail. And then comes first part of September where the blackberries are really abundant. The apples, the plums in the trees are ripening, ready to eat because the bears are hammering them. And I'd walk into the village for work in the morning because it was an abandoned native village. I was staying on a boat or my cabin around the corner, and I'd commute to work on a speedboat. But anyway, I'd walk in the village to what we called old soccer field. And I'd look up whoever was with me and go, oh, Sasquatches are back in the village. How can you tell? See that animal trail? Look how big it is now. Remember, it had a couple branches up high at 6 and 7 feet. Well, look how they've been bent and they're leaning into the main part of the blackberry bushes. I said, Sasquatch is back. And sure enough, you'd see the evidence of the tracks on the beach where they went down at low tide or whatever. You'd hear them. We'd go, a couple times we'd go in at night and investigate. Basically, we just go into the village, and where the old school was, it's kind of elevated above the village deck, maybe about 25 feet higher than everything else. And the village is this laser flat, overgrown with fruit trees and abandoned houses. But we just sit there and listen. And you'd hear the bears. When bears are harvesting plums, they'll reach up and just break everything, pull the branches down to them with the plums. But when the Sasquatch is picking, you could just hear the shake, shake as they're grabbing plums or apples and pulling them. You just hear shake, shake. And you'd hear crunch, crunch of the apple. And we didn't have flurs or anything back then, but you'd be sitting there whispering to each other, is that a bear, Tom? No, that's a Sasquatch. That's not a bear. I said, it's not pulling branches. You could hear those apples being pulled out and the crunching of it. And, respect your Sasquatch. Sasquatch lives matter. We were no thought of shooting them or anything. We didn't even want to go light them up with a spotlight. This is early 1990s, mid 1990s. There's no podcast, video casts, Facebook groups of Sasquatch or movies or documentaries with multiple years of seasons. We didn't have any of that back then. To us, it was just entertainment. We didn't have TV. Let's go sit in the dark village tonight and listen to Sasquatches. And most times it was bears feeding, but every so often we'd hear what we thought were Sasquatches.
What do you think about them having a language, the Sierra Sounds and the interpretation by Scott Nelson of them possibly having a language?
Well, Sierra Sounds, it's actually right beside me here in the store. I'm Ron Moorhead, a good friend of mine, and what do you call it? Highly respect the work he did, but my honest opinion, I only find two of the tracks in Sierra Sounds that I believe to be Sasquatch. Samurai Chatter, not a Sasquatch. I've never heard it myself, and I've played it I remember I bought the cassette back in the day when it was advertised in a magazine, I think it was. And then when it came out as CD, I bought that times two because I lost one. But I remember playing it to numerous Indians, and nowadays I just use my cell phone when I'm interviewing my fellow North American Indians, and they all just shake their head. Nope, we're not Sasquatch. And that's the Samurai Chatter. So as far as language, that's why I say work with your local Indians. If you want to find a Sasquatch or get a better understanding of Sasquatch, you have to follow the anthropological path and understanding to learn it of your local Indian tribe where you're going to Sasquatch investigate. So in other words, when you read about the Indians here on the Olympic Peninsula, the Quileutes, the Makah, the Quinaults, you'll find out that they had a seasonal migration based upon mainly marine resources, salmon rivers during the salmon season, steelhead, trout, different area, smelt, newligans, shellfish, clam, the clams especially. And then you find out that they would go this area for cedar, for clover, for huckleberries, for salal Well, when you correlate that to Sasquatch encounters, you'll find out that the Sasquatch encounters take place at those seasonal abundant areas that the local Indians may or may not still be practicing. A lot of them still do, but traditionally used to practice for thousands of years. And then when you talk to your local Indian tribe and ask them protocol and permission to investigate their local Sasquatch, they're going to share with you because you're showing them respect as humans. You know, most of us Indians don't get respect from non-Indians. You know, it's whoever thinks about asking the Indian tribe for permission to investigate Sasquatch in their traditional territory. No one. And that's what I'm educating people to do. So they open up that hopefully cooperation, understanding, and friendship with the local Indians and get a better perspective on the Sasquatches. And you might even get the phone call, hey, you better get down to this river. The fisheries patrol people are in our tribe are saying a lot of activity. You know, that's what they do with me. And then in turn, when you get advanced interaction with your local Indian tribe, you may find out that some of the Indian tribes still practice the age-old custom of interacting with their local Sasquatches. Many tribes did up until contact, and some still do, because that's where they learn, as we know with the Omaha, they call their Sasquatch Sitonga, keeper of the medicine. And someone I spoke with who's a medicine person of the Omaha tribe and other tribes, they tell me that they will leave for weeks, months, sometimes in the old days, years, to go live in the forest and interact with the Sasquatch so that they can learn the medicinal plants, roots, remedies, poultices. And that's a relationship we Indians and Sasquatch have had for thousands of years, and some still do. So that's why I always say it's always best to interact with your local Indians, because it's going to increase your chances of getting close to a Sasquatch and having that close encounter of the hairy kind.
What do you think about the Patterson-Gimlin film? You think that's authentic?
Absolutely. And what I think about the Patterson-Gimlin film, stupid humans, quit being so damn disrespectful and attacking it that do, and question it. Bob Gimlin's a living 94-year-old elder. Show some respect and don't harp on it being possibly fake. I find that so disrespectful. And the other one is Roger Patterson's dead. Show some respect. Don't be ridiculing his stuff. They filmed the real Sasquatch. Show that video to someone who's seen a Sasquatch and get their opinion. That is a Sasquatch, bar none. And anyone else who's come up with bunk and BS about it, like the guy who imitated Walking Like Patty and claimed he was the one in the suit, disrespectful humans with poorly developed frontal lobes, smarten up.
What do you think about MK Davis's thoughts that they were actually out there hunting Sasquatch on that day?
I don't know. Can't answer that. Never listened to MK Davis.
Yeah, he's watched some of the original films supposedly that Mrs. Patterson had. And he thinks that, you know, there's several maybe been shot. There was a bloody pool of water, and you know that it was a really tragic sort of day.
I never heard anything like that. Mind you, I don't listen to podcasts or video casts. I just do them. I don't even listen to mine.
Well, I can understand. So to end our interview, what else would you like for our audience to know?
Basically, if you want a close encounter of the hairy kind, ask to join Sasquatch Island on Facebook. Please keep your opinions of the supernatural, cloaking, portal jumping, UFO flying, orb turning, glyph leaving Sasquatch to other groups. Mine is strictly critterist, because I've all the experiences with Sasquatch. They've never done anything grandiose and supernatural around me. And join the group, have a beverage, sit down, and for days you're going to scroll back and read all my posts. And afterwards you have a better understanding about Sasquatch, because that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to teach you to have that close encounter and hopefully get some good video and audio. And, you know, once we do have our cell phone and you're getting a Diane Fossey, Jane Goodall interaction with your local Sasquatch and we videotape, the plaque and chips and staining on their teeth, the movement and dilation of the pupil, the movement of muscle structure in the face as they're eating food, the epidermal ridges, and maybe we'll answer the question whether or not they do have a mid-tarsal arch or not. And, the fingerprints and the coloration of the nails and so forth. And then we can bring it to the capital D small r periods with their names, and they can come back with analysis and say, yeah, I study eyes, and those are real eyes. You can see the dilations and this and that. And then we have our conclusive proof by video and audio. And, we have to work together, work with your local Indian tribe, and let's get conclusive proof so that we can, start protecting our environment, which we share with Sasquatch, because Sasquatch lives matter and our lives matter. And we have to quit doing what we're doing to this planet. Otherwise, Earth first, we'll log mine, strip mines, overfish this planet. Well, we're gonna have to move somewhere, and it doesn't look very hospitable up on Mars from that little rover running around. So let's find Sasquatch, let's be respectful, and let's never condone harming them or killing them.
How can someone get any of your artwork? Is there a way online that people can order that?
Best thing, SasquatchIsland.com, my website. Go to the art gallery page, go to SasquatchLegend.com, the store here. We have a big online store, and all my t-shirts, shower curtains, coffee mugs, tumblers, you name it. It's all on there, plus other stuff. And Facebook, Sasquatch Island. And don't forget, Biggie behind me, me and him do TikToks every couple days. So Sasquatch Island throughout.
Okay, thank you so much for the interview. I'm going to go ahead and end it now, and I'll let you know when it's up. I know you won't watch it, but I'll let you know anyway.
Oh, no, I'll watch it. Definitely send me a link.
Thanks. Bye-bye.